Well, this is JC one more time. As you can see, it's kind of dark. I, uh, I have my my storytelling Todd shirt on here, so I can stay comfortable during the reading of this chapter 28 of Todd. It's sort of you'll see, it's not really exciting, but I think it's long enough compared to the other chapters to be a chapter. So I just kind of chaptered it off. Go ahead and read it. I hope you enjoy it. And without further ado, I'll go ahead and start on this chapter 28 of my book entitled Todd. The day was finally ending. Todd asked Les and Betsy to accompany him aside for a brief discussion concerning Jake and Chuck. They excused themselves and moved to a table just out of earshot. Todd asked Betsy what her views were on the hiring or including the two men in the company, either as hired hands or contractors. She immediately said she did like the idea. Les concurred, adding it was growth and, if handled right, would likely be good for the business. After several minutes, the three went back to the group. Todd asked point blank both Junior and Jim if they thought hiring the two men was a good idea. Without hesitation, both said they did think it a good idea, as long as they could work out a fair wage for both. Todd asked both Jake and Chuck if they were committed to the company now as part of Daniels Hardware Incorporated and its franchises. He and the others guaranteed them they would receive fair wages for their work. They assured him they were fully committed, and they shook hands on it all around. Now, while they were all here together, Todd said he would like to address one aspect of Chuck's position. He pointed out that there were a couple of options for Chuck. He could hire on as a regular employee in the company, based here in Dexter or wherever he would be best used, or he could hire on as a private contractor to haul the company's supplies. If he hired on as a private contractor, the hauling would be his only responsibility, and he would be responsible for any permits or licenses needed. If he hired on as an employee, he would receive a reasonable wage, plus travel and any other company expenses, and the company would foot the bill for the permits. Todd said Chuck could have whatever time he wanted to consider the options. Now Chuck spoke to Dana. Well, little girl, what do you think about all this? She said, I kind of like it. It sounds like something that might have a future for us. And who knows, maybe someday the store will need more help and I can dump this truck stop job. She added, but you'd have to stay here in Dexter because wherever you go, I go. All right then, said Todd. That pretty well settles it. We'd better head on back home if you girls are ready. Both Betsy and Leslie said they were. Todd told Chuck to let him know what he would prefer to do, just hire on or act as a contractor as soon as he could. We have permits to get, and it shouldn't be long now before we start the actual redoing everything to match. With that said, everyone stood and started out of the cafe. Dana said she would stay until her shift was up. Got to keep in good with the boss, you know, she said with a grin. Junior reached for the bill, but Todd beat him to it. You can get it next time. We'll have steak instead of pie, he said. It was a quiet ride back to Belton. It seemed everyone was talked out. Todd knew every detail of what had yet to be done. In his mind, he rehearsed the action he had to take to get this rolling, to get it off the ground, so to speak. Betsy spoke up first. It's been a good day, she said. I might be crazy, but I'm glad we're including everyone in with us. I think it will make things easier in the long run. She added, I know there will be more work for me to do, but I've done so little lately compared to what I did at first. It's been almost boring. A faraway look came over her eyes, came over her then. I just wish Bobby was here with us. Yeah, me too, said Todd. I regret sometimes Dad and I, even you and I, did so little together. They pulled up now in front of Todd's house, and Leslie kept the engine running. Betsy got out and walked around to the driver's side and gave Les a little hug and a kiss through the open window. Todd slid close to Les and kissed her and pushed his hand against her cheek. Good night, sweetie, he said. I'll call you tomorrow. If you think of anything we haven't covered, let me know. I think we're going to be big very sharp about all of this. I think you are going to be big, very sharp about all of this, a natural. Then he slid back to the passenger side and added, call me when you get home. Les smiled and said, I will, dear. Have a good night. And she pulled the car away from the curb and headed for home. Leslie's mother met her at the door and took her hand and kissed her cheek. I was getting a little worried about you, she said. Mr. Foley walked over to her now and gave her a big hug and with a grin said, well, daughter, did you get everything done today? Les kissed her father and said, yes, I did, Daddy. What a story I have to tell you and Mom. What an exciting day this has been. Her mom asked, are you hungry, Leslie? Leslie said she wasn't, and Mr. Foley headed toward his den. And Les said, I'll be right there. I got to freshen up a bit. And she went into the bathroom. She splashed water over her face and freshened herself, and after assuring herself she was presentable, headed for the den. Her dad was behind his desk, and Mrs. Foley sat on a settee that was just across from the desk. Les took a swivel rocking chair, her favorite, and she sat. She smiled as she looked at her parents. You're just not going to believe everything that happened today. First, let me say, Todd's mother is just about the greatest woman I've ever known. Next to you, of course, she said to her mother. And there are no words to describe Todd and all his attributes, his knowledge and the scope of understanding. If anyone in the world knows everything, it is Todd. I've wondered sometimes if his life gets boring, never being surprised about anything. Leslie's parents listened intently and waited for their daughter to finish her praise of her young man. Les started a bit now and said, gosh, I've been talking your ears off and I haven't even started telling you about today's events yet. Mr. Foley took a bottle of bubbly champagne from the cabinet cool shelf and poured a splash into a glass for himself, then did the same for his wife and Leslie. He handed them their drinks and said, sip slowly. Les sat back in her chair and began telling her folks everything, beginning with a strange phone call she received last night. They listened to her for over an hour as she transitioned from one subject to another. Occasionally her mother would say, oh my, or some other little tidbit, and a couple of times her father asked questions to clarify some point. All in all, the story progressed smoothly, even the part about Dana and Chuck. Mr. Foley asked, how much needs to be done now to get the franchise going, to begin operations? I'm not sure just how much we need to do still. I'm sure Todd knows, and I have an idea he'll be telling us about it tomorrow. He seems very anxious to get going right away. You know, we've hired 2 people already, and we haven't turned a wheel yet. Leslie's mother looked at her daughter now and with a smile said, Leslie, you're really into this now, aren't you? Yes, I am, Mom, said Leslie. It's all very exciting. Carla said to her daughter, dear daughter, I hope you get everything in life you want. Thanks, Mom, responded Les. I already have. But this is just frosting on the cake. And this is the end of chapter 28 of my book entitled Todd. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you'll come back again for chapter 29. And until you do, this is JC saying I'll see you down the road if the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise.